Hello, hello, hello. I'm Tamara Wren, and I am your host for Kingdom Birth Conversations with Tamara. This is the place where we discuss all things birth through the lens of a Jesus lover. I am here to inspire Christians to invite God into their birth room and create curiosity for everyone else. So let's get started on today's topic. Today's topic is a question and answer segment. So I guess technically it's not a topic. It's a segment on questions and answers. And I'm going to share two questions that I get whenever I teach a childbirth class and whenever I work as a doula. But before I get to those two questions, I have some housekeeping for you. I'd love it if you could like, comment, and subscribe to my channel so that whenever I deliver my message, which is the second and the fourth Saturday of the month, you will get it. And in order to know that the message is dropped, I need you to also hit that bell so that you can be notified. Before I begin today's conversation, I want to just be completely transparent with you. This week was a bit of a challenging work week. I have some projects that I'm working on, and I was trying to pretty much manage my time in a way that would not make me feel overwhelmed. But there were moments where I did feel a little bit overwhelmed. And I recognized that some of that overwhelm was coming from me wanting to do all the things at the same time. And the way I know that I'm overwhelmed is how I react to situations, which is I tend to overreact to situations when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I also have dreams, certain types of dreams. I call them the lost dreams. And in these lost dreams, I have learned to recognize that when I'm taking on too much, when I am spreading myself thin, these dreams manifest. They're literal dreams where I'm lost in them. And so I started having those dreams again this week. And that was like the final straw to tell me to slow down. And I pretty much procrastinated with getting this recording done because of that feeling of overwhelm. So I just want to say to anyone that's listening, if you are at a place where you feel like you are taking on too much, know what those signs look like for you. You know, how do they manifest mentally? How do they manifest physically? Do they knock you off your sleep cycle? Do they make you irritable or moody? Do they make you procrastinate? You know, what is it that your system, your body, your mind, your spirit, how does it reveal to you when you're doing too much? Okay. So I just wanted to put that out there to you. I have been committed to being consistent with these messages, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging when you're juggling other things as well. But I'm here because I love this topic, and I am hoping strongly that it blesses someone and that you can use this content not just during the childbearing year, but that the content that I'm sharing resonates with you just in terms of being an advocate for your health and well-being and for your loved ones as well, right? So let's get started on today's topic. As I mentioned to you, I have two questions, and I wrote them down because I do not pretend to remember all the finer details. The questions that I have for you are questions that come up, and I'm just doing two. They come up all the time in a class. It's usually one of the first things that someone asks me, and I typically hold off on answering this question later in the training or working with them. And there's a reason why I do this, because there's so much other stuff that we need to have a conversation about before we can get into these details. The two questions that I have for you today are, how do I know when I'm in labor? And when do I go to the hospital or call my midwife? Now, typically they don't ask me when they call their midwife because there's more of a tendency for people who are having a midwifery birth or birth with a midwife. They're giving birth at home or they're going to a birth center. They tend to be better prepared for this question. But I do get the question, when do I go to the hospital and how do I know when I'm in labor? So I'm going to start off by talking about labor and what are the signs of labor. And before I get to that, when I work with clients as a doula and they call me to tell me that they are in labor, I have a series of questions that I go through with them. And the reason why I ask these questions is early in my career as a doula, I quickly learned that if you do not ask the right questions, you can show up to a client's home and hear the statement, "Oh, my contractions stopped." And then you end up either going back and forth, or you end up spending hours there waiting for them to have contractions again, right? So I learned this very quickly in my career. So here are some of the questions that I ask. A client calls me, they tell me that they're in labor, and I want to determine if what they're experiencing are true signs of labor or if their body's still preparing. I will ask them, how long have you been having contractions, or when did your contractions begin? How close together are your contractions? How long do they last? How long have they been coming at this regular pattern? What do you do when you have a contraction? And then I give them a scale with some faces on it, a smiley face, a sad face, and 4 different faces. They have that in advance. And I say, using the scale I gave you, which face describes your level of discomfort? Then I also ask them, using the scale that I gave you, which describes how you are coping. And based on the feedback that I get from them and being on the phone with them through at least 3 contractions, I try to get a sense of where they may be in the labor process and is it time for me to go to them. So this question comes in. This is how we answer the question, how do I know when I'm in labor? There are times when a mom will be in labor and not realize it for hours. So for example, that was my situation. I thought that I was just having a stomach ache, and I kept getting up and going to the bathroom, and I thought I was having like a mild case of diarrhea. But after going through this for about an hour or two, a couple of hours, I realized that this was probably labor, and I called the midwife to get an assessment. She gave me some feedback. I, took a warm bath to see if it would subside. And after going through this for a number of hours, I realized, so this probably is the real deal. What I can tell you that labor is not what you see on television where the water breaks and people are running around frantic. That's the dramatization of birth, which serves absolutely no purpose in real life. It is not this emergency where suddenly, out of the blue, you're having these major contractions that are, hitting you like massive waves in the ocean. So labor, your water breaking does not mean that you're in labor. Seeing your mucus plug come out does not mean that you are in labor. Having backache does not mean that you're in labor. What are some other things that we think of? Having some diarrhea does not mean that you are in labor. Having your cervix starting to dilate, maybe you've gone to the doctor and they recognize that there's some dilation or there's some changes, some cervical changes. Those things don't mean that you're in labor. The questions that I ask are the questions that let you know if what you're experiencing are signs of true labor. And I don't use the term false labor because I don't believe there's such a thing. I believe your body's always getting ready. But those signs of labor are that you're having contractions that are lasting longer, growing stronger and coming closer together. And yes, they are causing your body to have some cervical changes, but you might not recognize the cervical changes unless you are actually doing your own internal exams. But it's contractions that are lasting longer, coming stronger, and getting closer together. And so this is the pattern that we're looking for in order to tell, yes, it sounds like your body has entered into a state of laboring, and now it becomes like a waiting and watching to see what happens. Do those contractions increase? Do they come closer together? Are they getting more intense? What's happening with the body? And so that's why I ask those questions that I do before I go to see a client. The second question that I get asked is, when do I go to the hospital? There's a little technique that we like to use in the birth world, and it's called 411 or 511. It essentially means that if you have a rhythm of contractions that have been coming 4 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart, they've been lasting for 1 minute, and this has been happening for 1 hour or longer, that could be a good time for you to go to the hospital. Now, this is not set in stone, and there are other factors that you could take into consideration, but it gives you a baseline to work from. What I like to tell my clients is you also have to use wisdom or discernment, meaning if you live 45 minutes from the place where you're giving birth and it's rush hour, you might not want to wait until your contractions are coming 4 minutes apart. You might want to go a little bit sooner. On the other hand, if you're around the corner and you can just walk over, or it takes 10 or 15 minutes to get there and it's the middle of the night, then maybe 411 instead of 511 will work for you. So again, it's a pattern of contractions that are lasting either 4 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart, lasting for 1 hour and coming at it's 4 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart. The contractions are lasting for 1 minute, and this pattern has been taking place for 1 hour or longer. The other thing that will help you make the decision, in addition to your travel time, is, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe at the location that you currently are at? Do you feel comfortable there? Or are you feeling anxiety that would be best relieved by going to the place that you're giving birth? So these are just different things that you want to take into consideration, and know that it is also possible for you to get to your place of birth after feeling those contractions for 4 to 5 minutes apart, lasting for 1 minute. This rhythm is for an hour, and find that your baby is still high up in the pelvic outlet, maybe has not entered into the middle of it yet, is still high up. You may find that you have limited cervical dilation or cervical changes. It's not, you can't use it to say this is definitely going to mean that when you get to the place of birth that it's going to be, time for you to push that baby out, but it gives you something to work with. We've come to the section where we are now going to put our faith into action. Everything that I talk to you about, or at least most of the times, there's going to be a correlation that I like to make as far as how it shows up in the Bible, in the Word of God. And for this conversation about questions and answers, we're going to talk a little bit about wisdom and what it means to have wisdom in birth. So I'm going to take you to Proverbs 4, verse 5 through 7, and it says, "Get wisdom, develop good judgment. Don't forget my words or turn away from them. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her and she will guard you. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment." So here we see that having wisdom leads to good judgment. So what exactly does that mean in birth? I often meet people who decide not to take childbirth classes, or they take a really quick class, maybe a hospital class, and they think that, I'm good, I'm ready. I know all the things I need to know. I've researched online, so forth and so on. But here's what I can tell you. I am biased. I am biased towards having classes with an independent childbirth educator as opposed to a hospital. The reason why I am biased is because I do believe that when you work with an independent childbirth educator, you are more likely to get information that serves your needs and your preferences. You're more likely to get information that speaks to how to practice autonomy over your body, your baby, and your birth. And you're more likely to get information that is not focused on the policies and the procedures of the hospital, but focuses on your needs as an individual, your preferences as an individual, the things that are non-negotiable to you, and to give you more of an opportunity to practice informed decision making, which means you make informed consent or informed refusal, and you're sharing that decision making process with your care provider. So that is why I am biased. In order to have wisdom, you need to seek out information from places and people that are going to give you fact-based information and not fear-based information. And by having this wisdom, you will be able to make better decisions. You will be able to have judgment. And as we see here in the word, just reading Proverbs 4:7, getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do. And whatever else you do, develop good judgment. So having that wisdom, God says right there, wisdom is very important in life, in general, in all the things we do. And having that wisdom leads to good judgment. The questions that I shared with you, knowing when to go to your place of birth or knowing when you're in labor, that comes from gaining wisdom, and then you are able to make a judgment call based on the information that you have. So that's the first verse that I want to share with you. The second verse I want to share with you is in the Old Testament, and it is 1 Kings 3, and I'm going to read to you from 1 Kings 3, 9 through 12. And this is a conversation basically between Solomon, King Solomon, and God. And it says, give me an understanding heart. This is where God has asked him what he would like. He says, give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and have not asked for a long life or wealth or the death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart such as no one else has had or ever will have. And here we see in this verse alone, because Solomon asked for wisdom, you can see here how highly esteemed wisdom is to God. It was so important to God that Solomon asked for something that transcended things or status or ability, that he blessed him with riches and wealth, which is what we go on and see later in that verse. But the focus here is not the additional things that God gave, but the fact that God was like, wow, you know what? I will give you what you asked for, and I will give you a wise and understanding heart, such as no one else has had or ever will, simply because he asked for wisdom. So here we see that wisdom is important to God. You can ask for wisdom in every single solitary thing related to childbearing. You can ask for wisdom in planning a pregnancy, planning a birth, the care providers that you choose, the resources that you access, where you get your information, even the evidence that's placed before you. You can ask for wisdom for discerning, what does this information mean? Is this information for me or not for me? You can have discernment we can't plan everything in labor, right? But you can have discernment that as decision making moments come up, you can have the wisdom to make the right decisions in the right moment and have good judgment. So here we see that when we put our faith in action in that birth space, that not only do we have tools like 411 or 511, not only do we have the knowledge about when is our body in a true state of labor versus preparing, but we can take that information and we can give it to God and ask Him to sift through it so that we can put it together to make the best judgment calls for ourselves, or you can make the best judgment call for yourself. I enjoyed sharing this message with you, and I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation, but this month I am focusing on questions and answers. And the reason why I'm focusing on it is the more that I do this work, the more that it is instilled in me that you can know as much as you want. Like, I have tons of books on my shelf over here to the side of me about birth and labor and all the things. I get asked the questions all the time, but none of it means anything if you don't know how to not only apply it, but if you can't use your voice to speak up for yourself. And using your voice to speak up for yourself means having that wisdom, having that discernment, knowing how to navigate within that birth space, that whole hierarchy that is birth and pregnancy and all of that. So I will always give you information about the things that you ask for or the questions that are out there. But at the end of the day, it's more important that you know how to use the voice, and the people that are there advocating for you can help you with that process as well. So I have truly enjoyed recording this segment, and if you would like to get in touch with me, you can leave me a comment in the below. You can leave me a comment. You can reach me at Kingdom Birth Services or support at kingdombirthservices.com. So that's kingdombirthservices.com or support at kingdombirthservices.com if you want to reach out to me. Or you can just check me out on IG, Kingdom Focus Birth, or you can find me, different places around. And that concludes the message for today. And that concludes the message for today. I don't know. I feel like I'm drawing this out, just kind of working on my endings with these messages. But I hope this serves you well. Remember, the next focus is not for you to just rush through this content, but I really want you to reflect on it, pray about it, see how God would like you to apply it, and then share it. Share it with someone else who might need it. So you take care, and I will see you next time.